which had an immediate impact on oil prices, which shot up, breaching the $100 mark, or even the ongoing conflict in the region in Gaza, where we have seen oil prices fluctuating. How do countries navigate these geopolitical problems, at the same time ensuring that there is energy security and the prices are accessible?
I believe that we should first identify the new geopolitical dynamics we are talking about. If we go back to the last 3 decades, we have been focusing on 4 or 5 main concepts: globalization, interdependence, regulation of the use of force, peace dividends. And this has completely changed during the last 2 years and a half. And we have moved from these concepts to embrace new ones: confrontation, deregulation of the use of force, paralysis of the international system, paralysis of the United Nations and its central body, the Security Council. So we are dealing with a completely new environment. And when you talk about my country, I think that we are located in the region that is concentrating all these new phenomena that I have referred to. We have, of course, the conflict in Ukraine that is impacting our region. We have the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that is also impacting our region. And we have the Sahel region. And we are also feeling the impact of the deteriorating situation in this region on the Euro-Mediterranean area. And the president of Nigeria this morning referred specifically to this issue. So as far as Algeria is concerned, when we talk about energy, we have tried to be a reliable, trustworthy partner in our region. And we have established a very complex network of cooperation with our partners in the region. And the buildup of this new complex network of cooperation in our area has gone very sophisticated. And I believe that this was not done at the cost of our commitments to the alleviating of the effects on our environment. And I believe that we will be going in more depth on this issue to talk about the strategic relationship that we have built in our region.
Minister Lokbogri, to get you in on and drawing in what Mr. Ataf was saying, that the geopolitical situation has completely changed in the last 2 years. There are new challenges that have been thrown up, and this comes at a time when the world is grappling with a climate crisis, and there is this pressure on the global community and nations for this energy transition to speed that up. How difficult is it for you, as someone who's an oil-producing nation as well, also in a continent where there are conflicts and issues? How do you balance that, at the same time ensure that the energy transition pathway, you do not deviate from that?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, to be part of this panel. But let me, start by saying that when you talk about energy, security to those from the north, it means, comfort for them. But for those of us in Africa, it's an existential problem. And it is something that the world actually hasn't looked at. These emissions, that, of course, the climate problem we have today didn't happen overnight. At the African level, we have been talking among ourselves, and we're saying that, look, for the past 100, 150 years, those from the north have used, fossil fuel to industrialize. And today, they're talking about sustaining the comfort that they have been able to achieve using fossil fuel over, this long period of time. But for us in Africa, we're still at a stage where we haven't even started. We have, like for instance, in Nigeria, we have 37 billion barrels of, proven crude oil. We have 207 trillion cubic feet of gas. Are you going to say that we should abandon those resources? It will be very difficult to do so. And let me also, say that the world should also be thinking about solutions to the, to the emissions already in the planet. We're talking about preventing future emissions. What about the ones that are already in the planet? Records are showing that, over the past 100 years plus, those from the north, substantially, has caused emission of about 2,500 gigatons into the planet. And if we focus our energy on technology that will capture this emission, even if we take 20% of it, the world will have some peace. Instead of, campaigning for, energy transition at a pace that will not be acceptable to Africans. And so, from the African perspective, we believe that we have to use our resources, first of all, to ensure that we have substantial energy security before we talk about transition. We cannot also transit at the same point. We can't transit at the same pace. You can recall that if you look at the global emissions, Africa contributed only about 3%. The rest came from the West. Instead of campaigning, for peanuts to be given to countries if they want to stop fossil fuel production, why don't they use a substantial part of that money on, doing research to evolve technologies on carbon capture? And if they are able to do so, I believe that we'll be able to get a technology that will capture even a small percentage of it, and the world will be safer for it. But for Africa, I believe that energy security is an existential problem. We cannot transit at the same point. We are victims. And I think that the world should look at it from that perspective.
Rafaela, if I can get you in over there, and you look at the big picture across different continents, and we just saw what the minister said about the situation in Africa. But the fact is, bringing back the focus on specifically the geopolitics dynamics, we have seen massive events that have taken place geopolitically, and they've had a direct impact on energy security, energy pricing, and also throwing questions about whether, which the minister is also referring to, the energy transition plan, the speed at which it has been set at, is it realistic or achievable? In that sense, has this added a new dimension to this whole energy transition and leads to questions about whether the initial targets that have been set out could be complicated because of what we are seeing globally right now?
Well, I'll start with thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here with, I think, a diverse panel in terms of different regions, which makes it really rich in terms of discussing and understanding that differently from other times and where we were all focusing in one direction. The energy transition makes us have to understand that we are speaking of something that isn't one silver bullet, and it's going to be different realities have to be tackled with a different set of tools. So and it's important, in Brazil we have been speaking a lot about a just energy transition that, yes, brings this different dynamics, brings the dynamic that we have to really try to bond together clean energy, but it has to be affordable, and it has to be affordable and accessible to all. So in countries like in Africa, we will have several people that have still problem with cooking with clean energy. In Brazil, we have the Amazon region where we don't have people that's still isolated and do not have access to electricity. So China has done an excellent job, and although their carbon neutrality is for 2060, they have been really doing amazing things in terms of solar panels and technologies. And this everything has to really be acknowledged. So from this point of view, I think that we must understand that we still need security, and we still need affordability. And for each country, we'll have to understand what is the perfect mix to make this feasible. So from a Brazilian perspective, Latin American perspective, we understand that we still produce fossil. However, we have a very clean matrix, and we are able at the same time to start to understand what are the diversification of energies that we can bring along. What are the investments in energy storage and energy in carbon capture? What could we be doing in terms of grid modernization? This is a reality that will be tackled and must be tackled for everybody, all over the world. Then the regulatory and the policy supports that each country will need, and this is different region to region. But most importantly, before ending here, I think that although we are in a polarized moment, it's very important for us to even more bond together, understand each one's perspectives, and how can we cooperate, how can one come together with the other. And Brazil's reality may be something that can inspire Africa in some places, in some discussions, bonding together with China in other discussions, and with Nigeria and different parts of the world. So this could really accelerate the discussion and less polarization.
Mr. Yang, bringing you in here, China is, of course, when it comes to the energy markets, is the largest consumer of oil in the world. And you have to constantly do this balancing act. For example, a few years ago, you had sanctions against Iran, where the United States was asking countries not to buy oil from Iran. You were customers for them. India was, two of the biggest markets. I'm giving you just one example. How do you balance these geopolitical dynamics that keep evolving? Now, those restrictions are not there anymore. Iran is supplying oil to the markets. However, a lot of it is still in unofficial capacity, but nevertheless, it's reaching the markets. So how is China balancing that while it's also trying to do this massive energy transition?
谢谢主持人，这个问题非常好，也很深刻。但我首先还是想祝贺沙特。非常成功地举办了这次世界经济论坛。作为一个发展中国家，这次论坛展现了沙特在地区的领导力。
Meeting of World Economic Forum, which shows the regional leadership of Saudi Arabia. As the geopolitical issues, I'm not an expert like Minister of Foreign Affairs. But I would like to share that from the perspective of energy, the impacts that the energy industry has faced. One of the first impacts is that the energy supply security is facing quite many uncertainties. Energy price is high.
这个根据4月份布伦特的这个石油价格，现在已经接近90美金。
Pricing in April, the price is almost $90, which is
应该说是保持在一个较高的水平。
Quite relatively high, according to the historical record.
天然气价格呢，现在已经达到了每磅90美金左右，比去年同期上涨了将近90%。
Critical mineral is also increasing, so we are facing this increase in energy prices, which brings a negative impact to our economic recovery worldwide. It also curbs the investment in energy transition. The second impact we have noticed is the polarization and the trade protectionism. Some countries are using governmental subsidy or the reason of overproductivity, overcapacity to limit the international trade by using tariff barriers. As you have mentioned, China is the largest new energy consuming market. China has quite many new energy production companies in solar panel energy and wind energy. So these fast developments in technology continues to bring down the production cost. It is not a result of governmental subsidy. I would like to share one number with you. In China, we have thousands of battery producers. Fully free competition on the market, which brings down the price for battery. If we take the fact as a result of trade protectionism or polarization, and that will then hinder the world energy transition by limiting its development. The third impact is the enlarging gap in terms of energy. China is a big country. The guests here with me today are all coming from the developing countries. We all need technology and financing support. However, in the past years or decades, we have noticed that our investment to the developing countries is not enough in terms of financing and technology. So the answer to this problem lies exactly in the main theme of this special meeting. First, we need to strengthen the international trading in order to guarantee the equitable and prejudice-free free trade across borders. And secondly, we must continue to increase our international cooperation for energy. We are advocating to set up a high-level platform around the globe in order to coordinate for global policy and to encourage global technology innovation. Last but not least, we need the developed countries to deliver their commitments from the Paris Agreement to support the developing countries. Thank you.
Mr. Yang, about a couple of interesting points, especially about the gap in terms of developing countries and developed countries. And of course, you touched upon trade and protectionism, which may not be something equal to a conflict, but again, it's part of the geopolitical dynamics as it plays out globally between the United States and China. I want to bring in Minister Atif again into this. What we are seeing globally now is this call that fossil fuels need to be phased out. And according to the International Energy Agency, they want a quarter of fossil fuel that has been consumed now to drop by by 25% in order to make a meaningful impact. Now, this is going to have implications on oil-producing states, whether it's Nigeria, Gulf countries, North Africa. How do you see this impacting the geopolitical dynamics? Because eventually this will lead to the dynamics within OPEC and other oil-producing groups changing, where some countries might end up having a larger market share. Is that a concern for oil-producing countries, and that how it could play out geopolitically?
Let me, first of all, follow up on what the Minister of State of Nigeria has said.
Yeah.
And I will start with some examples from my own region. Recently, as you know, in Niger, important oil discoveries have been made. In Mauritania and Senegal, the third largest oil gas has been discovered. And these three countries have gone from the era of using wood, destroying their forest, using biomass. And for the first time in their national histories, they are going through an era of availability of gas and oil that they used to pay or not pay because they did not have the resources. What shall we tell them? They are asking my country in Niger and in Mauritania for help because we have an experience in the area of oil and gas. They are asking for cooperation in this area. What shall we tell them? That look, there are the international commitments, agreements that, sorry, you have come too late. We cannot help you. And you should, and you must abide by the new rules. So we are balancing all that. And we are trying to reconcile our duties and international responsibilities with the need for fairness, for inclusiveness towards these countries that have emerged in the area of oil and gas, and we should not just tell them we are sorry. So,
Minister, if I may add on that follow-up, you think by denying them that opportunity, that creates a potential conflict or a fault line in the region?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe sincerely that with these new tools, and I'm talking about important oil discoveries in Niger and important gas discoveries in Mauritania and Senegal, this will help give a new impetus to their national development. And when you talk about new possibilities for a new momentum to national development, you will be fighting directly or indirectly in this area of the Sahel. The president of Nigeria was talking about so wisely this morning. You will be contributing to fighting terrorism in the area, international crime in the area, illegal immigration in the area. Those are tools that can be, so you have and you must include all these parameters in the definition of your global position on oil and gas and on the global transition to a new system of energy. So this is what I wanted to say. And second, completely on the other side, let me say, we are a Mediterranean country. We are a gas-producing country. We are asked by our partners in Europe more and more to deliver additional quantities of gas all over Europe from many, many countries. How are we supposed to do that? Increasing our exports in the field of gas. And I'm telling you about not one or two or three countries. There are many European countries asking for additional supplies. So we have also to reconcile this requirement with our global position on environment. I'm sorry, I've been very...
No, that's a valid point you raised, and I want to get in Minister Pogburi on this. Do you agree with what the minister just said about if the whole process of this transition is not done in a just way, like, for example, the example he gave about some countries discovering now a potential but denying that opportunity. Is that a concern for Nigeria as well?
Yes.
Because for you, oil production is, of course, a key contributor to your economy. And if that is taken away, it could create other problems within the region and internally.
Yes, I agree with him completely. You know, For Nigeria, it's projected that Nigeria will be perhaps the third largest country in the world, after China and India, by the year 2050. If, you say you stop Nigeria from using the resources, that God has given to us by way of oil and gas, which accounts for about 90% of our forex. And then the world itself will experience a new, the world itself will experience a new, dimension in terms of insecurity globally. And it is important that, in this, era of energy transition, we must transit in a just way that every country will be carried along. And there's no way you would tell me that Europe is demanding for additional gas from Algeria. And Algeria had a duty both economically and on humanitarian grounds to also supply Europe. And, what is more worrisome to us in Africa is that is there any country that's actually slowing down in this era of oil and gas production, in this era of transition? Is there any country that is slowing down in terms of fossil fuel production? America is the highest producer of fossil fuel today. Both gas and oil, they are the highest producers. Britain just gave about 100 licenses sometime last year for new explorations in the North Sea. Norway is ramping up. No country is slowing down. The only countries that are asked to stop and perhaps slow down are the countries in Africa. And why are they doing so? Because we have limited access to forex. We have limited access to capex. And so at the African level, I think that we need to also come together so that we can find a common solution within the African continent to solve our problems. We need to be looking at some homegrown, solution to our own problems. Because if UK can give new licenses for exploration in the North Sea of fossil fuel, they are all sincere. Is this issue of energy, transition? But as a continent, our governments have signed up to the Paris Agreement. But what we're saying is that we should be allowed to transit at our own pace. We can't transit at the same time. We are victims. From the records, emissions from Africa were only about 3%. So we're actually victims. But those who have contributed the other 97% are still increasing in production, and they have access to capital to expand their investments. And because historically, most of the investments in Africa have come from the West. If you come to Nigeria, the big oil companies are all from the West. The ExxonMobils, the Chevrons, the Total, the Shell, all are from the West. These are the companies that can actually attract huge capital investment, to the continent. But the point must be made that for the energy transition to be successful, no country should be left behind. And if you do not allow some of these countries to explore these resources in a more, sustainable way, and then that could give rise to new geopolitical, insecurity problems across the globe.
Mr. Yang, to bring you in, and I'm sure you heard the points made by both the ministers. As someone who's actually been on the forefront as far as the energy transition goes in terms of technology and other industries, how do you view this as a consumer? Some of the points raised that if it's not done in a just way, this transition, it could create new problems in different parts of the world. China is highly invested in Africa, for example. How do you view this problem of global transition and not being done in a just way?
Thanks for the question from the moderator. For the energy transitioning, it is a long and a bit painful process, especially for developing countries, because the energy transitioning, we need to deal with the relationship between transitioning and development, and transitioning and security, especially so for developing countries. For China, as a developing country, we are able to do lots of things. I'm just citing some figures to share with you what China has done in energy transitioning. One is that by 2023, China's renewable energy installed capacity has amounted to
1,500 gigawatt, accounting 40% of the total global installed capacity. And 2023, the new solar and wind installed capacity is 510 gigawatt, among which China accounted for half of these new installed capacity of solar and wind. Another facts and figure, EV has been developing at a very rapid pace in China. Out of every 3 vehicles sold in China, 1 of the 3 is electric vehicle. And this percentage is also picking up as we speak. So as a developing country, how can we fasten the pace of the energy transitioning? I believe that it requires us to have a top-tier design. China has made the commitment of these 2030 carbon peaking and 2060 carbon neutrality goal. Once China has announced this goal, Chinese government has also developed the overall plan to reach these 2 goals, and also for the oil and gas and building and transportation of the relevant sectors also have developed their own carbon peaking and carbon neutrality plans. Under these top-tier design roadmap, the corporates and also residents, they are implementing these plans to make sure that the carbon peaking and the carbon neutrality could be reached. Just now, the moderator also mentioned the technology, the role of technology in the energy transitioning. I believe technology plays a very important role. In China, we encourage the energy companies to invest more of their profits in the R&D, continue to develop new products. Because, for example, in China, the solar power generation in China is world ranking. And recently, we also have offshore wind power generating, which is the 16 gigawatt. A single blade is as long as more than 100 meters. Energy storage also has been developed in China to a very sophisticated level with many options. Technology is important, which calls for international collaboration and cooperation. China has set up these cooperation with more than 100 countries, such as Brazil and Nigeria. We are also promoting the Belt and Road Initiative to intensify this energy cooperation, including in Brazil. We have this mega power transmission project in Nigeria. We also have a clean energy project. We also have an energy project in Saudi Arabia. I believe that with these international projects, with these international cooperations, we need to have an open and also just environment to carry out these projects so that we can work together on technological development and to promote the progress of the renewable energy, to fasten our pace together in the energy transitioning, and also to address issues we have encountered in the energy transitioning to avoid the mistakes others have made. So I think that developed countries and developing countries, we have to do it together.
Quickly on this, we don't have much time left, but one other aspect which I want to touch quickly upon is that as this energy transition happens, there will be demand for critical minerals. Now, the concern on that front is that with demand for these minerals going up in the years to come, the concentration of these minerals is in a very few countries, which could again lead to an imbalance, which in turn could lead to more conflict, tension, and the dynamics geopolitically changing. How big a concern is that?
That's a huge concern. This is something that leading energetic project in Brazil, I've been studying this, and we should be concerned, because at the same time that we say that we should diminish oil production, or should be tackling increase in solar and wind and all of this, we will need for all of these, like batteries, turbines, solar panels, we will need these critical minerals. So, for instance, from a Brazilian perspective, but I'm sure this is a reality for Africa and other places, but we do have a diverse mineral reserve portfolio. This can be done in a sustainable way. So this, while we are advancing in the transition, and as I think that this is a message that has been leveraged throughout this panel, is that it's a transition. So while we continue to produce this oil, at the same time we should be looking at what's coming next and what is all the supply chain that we will need. So critical minerals are important for, and we should be looking, so from a Brazilian perspective, Latin America in general broad, we have this diverse mineral reserves, we can expand mining capacity, sustainable mining practices should be, we are starting to tackle that more and more, this discussion, the regulatory framework to be able to produce this in a sustainable way, and therefore not only delivering our capability, but being also a place that can deliver minerals for other places. But not just the minerals. Another important thing, and I think this for the developing countries, is how about we talk about friend-shoring, power shoring? So in places where we have cheap energy, for instance, China produces the solar panel. Countries like Brazil has a great amount of solar areas, and in areas that are arid, so we can't do so much plantation, for instance, in part of this. So why not have like the data centers installed, and then you have new labor forces being trained and new capacity being built, and things that will be important and productive for Brazil and will be for other parts of the world. So bonding together with the critical minerals comes along all the discussion of new forms of energy, new forms of labor force, new forms that we could be transforming and accelerating the path, while doing something that is very complicated, which is bonding together growth, economic growth, and sustainability and clean energy, because sometimes it can seem to be like contrasting or polarizing in terms of the reality bringing together these two.
So this will open up new complexities on the ground.
Exactly.
Which needs to be tackled. We've got 5 minutes left, and before I give the final word to all the panelists, I just want to quickly check if someone had a question to ask any of these panelists. We have mics. Someone can hand over the mics. If anyone is interested to ask a question to any of these panelists, please feel free. This is your chance to ask it. Okay, we don't have any questions now. Last 5 minutes, so I want to ask all of you to give your final thoughts. And I'll start with Mr. Yang here. Going ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenge as this energy transition moves ahead? Because what is clear in this discussion is that there's a huge divide. It's not been done in an equitable manner, and that could create more problems as the world progresses on this path. So a very short answer, from your point of view, from China's point of view, what do you see is critical as an issue to be addressed while this energy transition happens so that it doesn't create more problems?
这个问题一两句话好像很难去。
It is a question that is very hard to answer in 1 or 2 sentences when we talk about the energy transition. We have to rely on the international cooperation in order to learn the lessons and avoid the risks. And secondly, we need to design our own transition paths based on our own country's situation.
That every country has to design its own path, but then doesn't that take away from the bigger picture?
No, because then you can find the win-win situations where can Africa help Brazil, where can Brazil help China, Algeria, Europe, what are the win-win situations? So I know there are many to speak, so I think that global cooperation and places where you understanding what is your matrix, what are your strengths, how can you partnering where the country wins and the other country wins as well. So this is a new form of seeing it.
So that's a suggestion coming from two panelists here. Minister Lokbowry, what do you think from your point of view as a stakeholder, as one of the largest oil producers in a continent which has been left behind when it comes to a lot of indicators? How crucial is this to avoid any further conflict or tension?
Yeah, I mean, I concur. I completely agree with two of them. To the extent that all countries should be allowed to design their own transition pathway. In my opinion, we must, embrace transition, but we must be allowed to transit at our own pace. We must first of all ensure that we have energy security for Africa before we talk about transition. Already in Africa, we are putting different legal frameworks to see how we can transit at our own pace. But I completely agree with them that we can't transit at the same pace. Every country should be allowed to design its own transition plan. But that transition plan could be, tied to the global transition plan. Completely agree with them.
Minister Atif, the final word to you.
Absolutely, we are in the same.
We have an absolute consensus here on this issue.
Absolutely, you have it.
Yeah.
I believe that we share the same concerns. We have recently Algeria has recently hosted the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. And it is precisely in the name of these values and principles that have been put forward that we have advocated that special consideration should be given to gas in the context of the global transition, in the name of fairness and inclusiveness, because this gas summit has come to the conclusion that through gas as a component of the transition, this inclusiveness and this fairness could be and should be assured to all of us.
So fairness and just, these are the two major takeaways from this discussion, that it's important that this transition is done, keeping in mind the global goals, but it's very important that it doesn't create a polarization or a further divide between those who have and those who don't. And that's very clear from this panel. I want to thank all of you for sharing your suggestions, your views, and being candid about the issues that you all are facing in your respective regions. Thanks a lot. A big hand for this panel for sharing their thoughts, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.